There is a new Scotch Malt Whisky Society member distillery, and they happen to be from beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Let's talk about Shelter Point. Hey guys, welcome back to Whiskey on the West Coast. My name is Matt, and today we're going to be talking about Shelter Point Distillery from Vancouver Island, British Columbia, specifically Campbell River. Now, we'll get to the big news in a little bit, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the distillery first. Shelter Point, as mentioned, they're from Campbell River in beautiful British Columbia. They're right on the ocean. They're a farm distillery, and they are just making great whiskey. They were established in 2009. They had their first spirit come off the still in 2011, and really their whiskey is just coming of age now. The last year or two, they've had their first 10-year-old single malt official bottling bottled. I think they have a cask strength version of it too in very limited numbers. And more people are picking up on the fact that Shelter Point is just making fantastic malt whiskey right here in Canada, which is phenomenal because we're known for our rye, and I enjoy rye, but malt has my heart, which is why I'm so excited because Shelter Point and Two Brewers and a few others are just knocking it out of the park for Canada. So Shelter Point, the bottle I have in front of me right here is by Shelter Point. It's Smoke Point Batch 2. We'll be getting around to a review of that, but I want to I'm not breaking the news, but I want to get to the big news, and it's a big congratulations to go out to the people at Shelter Point, Jacob Weeb, and the rest of them. Shelter Point has been picked to be the first malt whiskey distillery in Canada to join the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. They will be the first distillery bottled by them. They have their own unique code, their number now, 152. The first bottling has been bottled. It's named, I think it's called Vivacious, Vibrant and Vigorous. Vibrant and Vigorous, that's what it is. 152.1. It's a big deal. It's a first for Canada, and I'm super proud to have this distillery in my home province, just making great whiskey. So congratulations to all you guys at Shelter Point. You're doing a great job, and just keep it up. Big news. So I figured, why not do a little bit of celebration review of Shelter Point and just keep spreading the good word. So, as I mentioned, right here in front of me is a bottle of Smoke Point by Shelter Point. Now, smoke, you're thinking, well, is it smoky? Is it peated? It's not a peated whiskey, but it does have a peated element to it. So let's get to the facts, the stats on this. This batch 2, this is bottle number 1100 to 1500, so small batch. It is bottled at 50% alcohol. It's non-chill filtered. It's natural color. And this is not a single malt whiskey. This whiskey is actually a combination of malted and unmalted barley, so they can't call it a single malt. So, I mean, it's going to have to be called a grain. Now, this whiskey, the thing that makes it Smoke Point as opposed to just a malt of some sort, or a grain whiskey, of some sort, is the fact that this spent 5 years in American Ex-Bourbon oak barrels and then was recasked for 18 months in an Ex-Islay Laphr Quarter Cask. So that's where it's picking up its peat influence from. That's where it's picking up its smoke influence from. And it's done some interesting things to this whiskey. And I think you can pick up a bit on specifically the similarities with Quarter Cask. You won't confuse this for a heavily peated whiskey, but it does share some hallmarks with that Laphr Quarter Cask. And we'll talk about that in a bit here. Outside of that, I don't think you need to know anything more about the distillery or this bottling, so I think we can get right into the review. As a real quick aside and a quick shout out and a plug to Adam at the Strath and the Dram Association, check out his YouTube channel. But if you're looking for a bottle of the SMWS release of Shelter Point, number 152.1, There's only 230 bottles, and at least in British Columbia, one of the 2 places I think that will have it is the Strath Liquor on Vancouver Island in Victoria. And I believe it's going to go to a draw or a lottery. And usually those are only open to current SMWS members. But if you are one of those and you're looking to get your hands on this bottle, either follow his YouTube channel, check out the socials, or put a call into the Strath Liquor in Victoria and find out what you need to do to get your hands on a bottle of the SMWS 152.1 from Shelter Point. On to the nose. Okay. Definitely a sweet grain note. Kind of like a cereal note, almost like a wheat. Yeah, like a sweet wheat. You can tell it's on the younger side, but it's not off-putting in its youth. Icing sugar, vanilla, some melon, so there is some fruitiness there, a bit of citrus too. And like almost like a herbal green tea sort of note. But the present thing that I always get once I have this uncovered for a few moments is like a real ginger ale, like not like a fake like Schweppes sort of thing, but like Canada Dry or better sort of ginger ale. You pick up a bit of that spice, but there's that sweetness too, and almost like this syrupiness along with it. Yeah, right there. Ginger ale. And there is a along with that there's like a peanut note, like a maybe peanut butter, but it feels more brittle than that, than like creamy or something, so I'm just gonna say a peanut note. Okay, before I get to the palate, quick thing about this bottle. I've seen some people struggling with these glass topper bottles. Quick tip, if you're ever having trouble, I had to learn this the hard way. You just push from the side, it pops right up. I honestly actually really like these bottles because you never have to worry about a cork drying out. On the palate. Honey. Bit of black licorice, and then peat, earthy, touch ashy peat, some smoke, a medicinal note, and peanut again, almost like a peanut brittle with that sweetness. A bit of like fennel, but again, this is where I notice the peat and the smoke the most on the smoke point, is palate to finish. I didn't mention on the first nosing there is a touch of like ashiness on the nose, but if you're not looking for it, you could easily miss it. But on the palate, you are not missing the fact that this is a peated cask whiskey. Another sip here. Okay, some spicing from the oak, for sure. Grapefruit citrus. There's a bitterness, but it still has an element of sweet running through it, which is just coming through like grapefruit for me. It's grapefruit citrus, a touch of melon or something of that nature. Not particularly like juicy fruit, but yeah, I'd go with melon. And there's a saltiness too. They're right on the ocean here at this distillery where they're aging these casks. You can definitely get some brine pulling through on the palate. The finish, there's some toffee notes. You get that malt, you get that oak spice. a touch of tobacco and earthiness with that smoke. And again, you get a bit of bitterness, probably from that oak. But it's actually, I don't love the nose on this whiskey. I think the nose is probably the weakest part of this whiskey, but the palate and the finish, very enjoyable. Really like it. One more sip here. Just focusing on the finish this time. The malt, oak. Again, like a saltwater taffy sort of thing. And right now, again, just the smoke. Some earthiness, maybe a bit of like dunnage sort of thing. And then it starts to just resolve. A touch of that bitterness after the sweetness. Not a short finish. It represents itself well with that 50% alcohol. I really like this whiskey. I don't think it's the best shelter point in the lineup. I think those honors go to the Artisenal Single Malt, the 10-year-old, the numerous cask strength single bottlings you can get. And there's even some other things like Ripple Rock is really good. But this was the only shelter point I had left at this moment. I used to have the double barrel. That's a great whiskey too, using French oak casks that previously held wine, either blackberry wine or sometimes just a red wine. Shelter Point is doing great things, and they deserve the accolades they're receiving. For Smoke Point Batch 2, I'm going to give this 86 out of 100. Again, not my favorite Shelter Point, but it's a really enjoyable whiskey nonetheless. And I really love that element of peat, which we don't see very often in a Canadian whiskey. Very few Canadian malt whiskeys have that element. And it's just really exciting to see people playing around with things like that. One of the later batches, I believe, used Ex-Islay casks. I haven't tried that. I think that was batch 3, starting around that. They switched from Laphr casks to Ardbeg casks. So I'd love to see what that does to the whiskey. But yeah, 86, it's a great score. If you haven't had Shelter Point, you see this on the shelf, you might as well grab it. It's local to British Columbia, and they're starting to make a name for themselves. As always, I just want to say congratulations once again to Shelter Point and everyone doing great things out there. Keep up the good work. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. If you could go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe, share this video. As always, I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. And if you can leave in the comments, have you had Shelter Point? And if not, what is your favorite Canadian malt whiskey? Or if you haven't had a Canadian malt whiskey, just your favorite Canadian whiskey. As always, thanks for joining me. Sláinte.